Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Williamsburg City Council work session of February 10th. Ms. McKay, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Williams.
Here.
Ms. Ramsey.
Here.
Mayor Pons.
Here.
Vice Mayor Dent.
Here.
Ms. Kernshire.
Here.
Thank you. Glad you all could make it. Items for the next meeting. Mr. City Manager, council previews.
Thank you, Mayor. We've got matters of special privilege, presentation of the Excellence in Service Award to Emmanuel Watkins. Then under public hearings, we have a right-of-way application from Colonial Williamsburg for a footer for First Baptist Church, as well as a special use permit for apartments in the LB2 district for a property at 1006 Richmond Road. The departmental report will be Wendy with Human Services, and then under new business, we have two items. The first is the acceptance of the consideration and acceptance of the annual comprehensive financial report, and a consideration for a tourism promotion contingency fund request for the Muscarelli Museum. And then the last item will be appointment of the or approval of the mayoral appointments for boards and commissions.
Thank you. Any questions for the city manager? Okay, leads us now to public comments. It's an opportunity if anybody would like to come forward and address council. I do have several speakers card. Mr. Wilson, I see you got two, one for open forum and one for town and gown. Do you want to do one now and one later? Or both later?
My name's Robert Wilson, 22 The Palisades. With respect to the next meeting in the presentation of the financial report, I had made some comments. If I got some feedback on those before the meeting, I may or may not need to speak at the meeting is the only comment I have about that. And I would like to talk at the, whatever the gown and the William Mary segment is, or at the open forum.
Okay, perfect. I'll save that card for you. Thank you. Mr. Hardaway?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hal Hardaway, 200 Harrison Avenue, City of Williamsburg. I just want to say a few quick words, I hope, about the vibrancy plan. As you perhaps you remember me saying before, I moved here from Alexandria to get away from crazy development. It's so bad up there that the people have created a Facebook page called Bring Integrity Back to Alexandria. Thousands of people, lots of unhappy people because of dumb development, and I don't know why any municipality would want to do that. You also probably remember me saying, lived all over the world, not bragging, 6 countries, the Tokyo suburbs, London's Mayfair, third world, and this is the place I'd rather live rather than anywhere in the world. And I'm not against development. Smart development's necessary. We need it. I'm not against affordable housing at all. That's necessary, but I saw how that was abused up there. I sense that the municipal offsites, the punch is spiked with the Kool-Aid of density developed and affordable housing. And possible evidence of that, I see the name of the study is Vibrancy. I heard that in Alexandria ad nauseum to get what they wanted to do, which has really messed things up a lot. So my request to you, and I'll end it here, is please don't be lemmings. I know you want a legacy, you want to show progress, we all do, it's human nature. But please buck the tide and let your legacy be preserving the jewel that is Williamsburg. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Another speaker's card, Ms. Kaiser.
Hi,
Hi, welcome.
Mayor, Council. This is serious if I actually wrote it down ahead of time, right? Your little thing says low battery, which is good because I'm probably going to be very verbose.
I've got another timer up here. So
Oh, rats, phooey. There are a couple things that I wanted to discuss. One is the 2018 vibrancy study, which seems to me, after 7 years and it having started pre-COVID, that a lot of its findings may be obsolete and that it should be revisited as a whole. And specific issues, wanted to share with you what I gleaned from rereading the comprehensive plan from 2021. There's an entire chapter devoted to the topic of neighborhoods, and it opens with the following statement, quote, "Strong, healthy neighborhoods are critical to city residents' quality of life, and the city is committed to preserving and enhancing them," unquote. So I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind. The same sentiments reflected in Chapter 7 of the comprehensive plan as well. It states the city's responsibility is to, quote, "protect and enhance Williamsburg's unique character as defined by its residential neighborhoods and by its iconic places. In the plan preamble, the following statement is made. Again, a quote, "Perhaps now more than ever, Williamsburg needs to preserve its historic center, while at the same time encouraging new development of compatible scale and character." That's followed by this next comment, "We should always take appropriate steps to ensure that Williamsburg does not lose its special character," unquote. In that vibrancy study, and Mr. Trivett, I took your advice and I went back and reread that page related to stakeholders, and it's not a surprise, it's exactly what I thought it was the first time I read it, and that is that there was great emphasis placed on I don't know who the stakeholders are, I'm waiting to find out, but there was emphasis placed on a great deal of positive feedback for increasing density per net acre in the downtown area and loosening height restrictions. I started an online petition, and I also went door to door in our neighborhoods, and I still have a lot of doors to knock on, but as of today, I've got 42 signatures on paper and 276 online, so I win compared to the 241 in the vibrancy study. All these signatures are saying is that we, the undersigned, oppose any zoning changes that would allow for increased density and looser height restrictions, especially in the area that most of us consider downtown, which is right over there. It's also stunning to me that doors that I knocked on in this area, there were so many people who had no clue and were unaware and uninformed that this could be their new front yard or backyard. I don't know whether this is a place where you would want to have copies of signatures. I'd be happy to submit them, but I don't think I'm finished collecting them yet. As for the Wells Fargo conversion, I have a minute and 41 seconds. Can I still talk about that as well?
Sure.
Okay. Approval of this request feels like there's no connection to the city's own goals. Back to the comprehensive plan, which further clarifies its responsibility to, quote, "improve the quality of life in the neighborhood surrounding William and Mary by building and maintaining effective working relationships between the city, university, students, neighborhoods, and landlords." At least we weren't last, we were second to last in that, but the plan also states that it needs to encourage an appropriate mix of housing and commercial uses, particularly in the downtown area and midtown area. Under land use categories, medium density multifamily residential zoning category, which recognizes duplexes, townhomes and apartments with densities up to 8 dwelling units per net acre. Design standards, this is a quote, "must be applied to ensure compatibility with surroundings, especially existing residential neighborhoods," unquote. The request to raise that net per acre to 11 units per net acre at the Wells Fargo building, with the possibility that it could go up to 14, doesn't in any way reflect the city's own goal. There's nothing in that proposal where the city has stepped in to say, we need to protect our neighborhood adjacent, which is Matoka Court, from light pollution, noise pollution, trash, traffic. There's nothing there. It is a free-for-all for a developer, but there's no feedback that says, oh, wait, there are people who live right over there, and they're used to having a business there that closes at 6 p.m., and now we're going to subject them to, I don't know, how many people can you cram into 11 units? I think it's more than 11. Parking, noise, light, 0. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kaiser. Okay, I don't have any other speakers cards, but the podium is still available if anybody would like to come forward. Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public comment section of the meeting, and we'll move on to presentations. And first, we have a presentation and discussion regarding the resilience application and feasibility tool. Ms. Griffin.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, Mayor.
Adaptation, excuse me.
This afternoon, I'm pleased to introduce 4 members of the Resiliency Adaptation Feasibility Tool Team. First, Dr. Wendy Stout from Virginia Tech, Benjamin McFarland from the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, Dr. Jessica Whitehead from Old Dominion University, and Dr. Elizabeth Andrews from the University of Virginia. Their work focuses on helping Virginia localities plan and forecast community and regional needs across various disciplines through a resiliency lens. Today, the team will introduce the RAFT program, provide an overview of how this will work in the city, and the process for moving forward. And I'll introduce to you first Dr. Wendy Stout.
Welcome, Dr. Stout.
We're supposed to have a presentation.
There it is.
Oh, there it is. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of the City Council. It is really, truly a pleasure to be here to introduce to you the RAFT, or the Resilience Adaptation Feasibility Tool. This is a collaborative effort, and it's designed to support communities in strengthening their resilience to environmental, economic, and social challenges. Today, we'll be discussing what the RAFT is, how it works, and how it can benefit the community here in Williamsburg and the communities around you. The RAFT is a comprehensive framework designed to help communities build resilience against a range of challenges, including climate change, flooding, economic instability, and social vulnerabilities. This initiative is a multi-university collaboration. I'm the Coastal Director at Virginia Tech. My colleagues, Dr. Jessica Whitehead, is the Director of ICAR at Old Dominion University, and then Elizabeth Andrews is with University of Virginia in their Resilience Department. Each institution brings unique expertise to the table, whether it's research, policy guidance, or community engagement. One of the key strengths of the RAFT is that it is deeply community-driven. Rather than imposing external solutions, we work directly with local leaders, stakeholders, and residents to co-develop strategies that align with their priorities. The project has been 10 years in the making, evolving over time to address growing and changing needs in communities across Virginia. Over the years, the RAFT has refined the process. We've incorporated lessons learned from past participants, and we've expanded in the approach to reach a wider range of communities, including rural towns and tribal nations. Over the past decade, the RAFT has supported many communities across Virginia, particularly coastal and flood-prone areas such as the Eastern Shore, the Northern Neck, the Crater region, and indigenous communities such as the Nansemond Indian Nation. By working with cities, towns, and tribal nations, the RAFT has helped implement tangible, community-led resilience initiatives. We are now excited to bring this initiative to the Historic Triangle, including Williamsburg, to identify key resilience priorities and collaboratively develop solutions that will benefit the city in both the short and the long term. Williamsburg has a unique historical and cultural identity. Our goal is to ensure that the resilience planning here aligns with the city's long-standing priorities while preparing for the challenges of the future. The RAFT follows a structured three-step process to assess and enhance community resilience. The first step is scoring and assessment. The first phase includes an independent evaluation of resilience based on a carefully developed scorecard. It can be done through focus groups, interviews, and planning documents. And this phase helps identify strengths, gaps, and opportunities. And Dr. Whitehead will share more about the step process. This is just an overview. Community workshop, the second phase, is a highly interactive workshop where community members, local leaders, and stakeholders come together to discuss their priorities. And this is where the guided discussions and collaborative exercises take place through the Resilience Action Checklist. And then there's a year-long implementation, which is the third phase, and the final phase, which ensures these priorities turn into action. The RAFT team works alongside with the community for a full year, providing technical support, assistance, and facilitation to help implement the identified projects. This process ensures that resilience planning is not just a theoretical approach, but it leads to real, meaningful change on the ground. The goal is to leave the community stronger, more prepared, and more connected than ever before. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleague from Old Dominion University, Dr. Jessica Whitehead.
Welcome, Dr. Whitehead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much, Vice Mayor, members of council, and thank you, Dr. Stout, for the introduction. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into these steps so that you know what to expect, what we may be asking of your staff and the residents of Williamsburg, and what we may be asking of yourselves. The first step, which will run from now until May, is the initial assessment through the use of a scorecard. This scorecard has been rigorously tested now over 10 years in many different localities. And it takes a look at planning, community engagement and health and well-being, policy, leadership and collaboration, risk assessment and emergency management, and infrastructure resilience using existing documents that you may have, including the comprehensive plan, the regional hazard mitigation plan, and others, and then backing that up with a series of focus groups and interviews with key staff, key local NGOs, key residents, anyone who you identify as someone to whom we need to speak. During this particular step, where we'll be looking for assistance from planning staff, in particular is in gathering these documents, which ones we should take a look at, particularly if there are documents that are unique to Williamsburg that you would like to be sure are included in the analysis, and then identifying stakeholders to whom we should speak either through interviews or through focus groups. This scoring phase this year will be led by Dr. Wee Yusuf at Old Dominion University in collaboration with Virginia Tech, and it's funded by the NOAA Coastal Zone Management Program. After we complete with this particular phase, we will ask questions, do scoring, particularly because we're involving students and their learning. It's important that we make sure that they've interpreted things correctly and are interpreting things as you see them in Williamsburg, because the key element of the raft is that it's all about what you need, getting that ground truth. Making sure that staff can help us schedule to come back and present the initial results of this before we proceed further to City Council, and then identifying those top priorities that the city has for further implementation. The second phase, which we're targeting for August, will be a resilience action checklist workshop. We invite key staff from the city, as well as key NGOs, key community leaders, if you're interested in participating, sending a council liaison to attend a workshop that takes a look at everything that comes out of the scorecard and identifies the priorities that Williamsburg wants to carry forward over the next year. These may not necessarily be priorities that you can complete over a year. For example, something like identifying needing to work toward a major grant proposal may be a long-term activity. But there may be things like improved communication or community education that may be priorities that emerge from the people who attend and are things that can be moved forward. The entire point is to make sure that it's something you can make measurable progress toward over the year of implementation. It's also very, very important that the people who attend this meeting, who are the focus group attendees, are the ones who are setting these priorities. That way we can make sure that it aligns with council, it aligns with what residents want. So these are not necessarily priorities that are coming down to you from the universities. We really just create the environment for you to be able to have these conversations. And then the final step of implementation takes a year. It will be funded with support from the Virginia Environmental Endowment. And each one of our implementation locations within the Historic Triangle will be working long-term with one of the universities to follow through each month and pull together a team who's willing to meet and carry through progress on these implementation goals. Taking a look at what the actions are, needing folks to attend those monthly meetings, make progress, say what can you do in an hour or two over a month that will help move this goal forward. And another feature of implementation is that where there are items that come up where university assistance is helpful, the RAF team will bring in that expertise from our universities. Last week we had a meeting for the first time online asking for faculty interest not only from the 3 universities at the table for the raft, but from across the Commonwealth to begin building a bench of faculty who have certain expertise that may become valuable depending on what those priorities are. So being able to bring some of those resources to the table and help you make some of this progress moving forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Elizabeth Andrews, who's going to talk about some of the examples that we've seen in some other places to give you an idea of some of the actions that you may choose to move forward. And I do want to introduce, since she traveled up with us, she's a new faculty here with Old Dominion University, Dr. Trong Lee, and she is our new green infrastructure specialist. So she's working with the RAF team.
Welcome.
Hello.
Hello, Ms. Andrews. Welcome.
So first I want to say thank you to Ben McFarland, who's the Chief Resilience Officer with the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. Read between the lines, he suffered through the HRBT to get here, so I want to thank him for coming. And
Familiar with that trip to go to HRPDC.
yes, yes. And I want to stress the fact that in conducting the RAF through the years, we always partner with the Planning District Commission. I like to say that they have the street cred. They know the challenges, the risks that are faced by a community, and so they're our partners from the get-go as we work with these communities. We started with 3 pilot communities, a city, a county, and a town, and they were spread out Eastern Shore, Middle Peninsula, and Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. So Ben's actually been a partner on this since the beginning. After we tested the scorecard with them, would a locality do this? Is this a reasonable question? Should we phrase this differently? We did the Eastern Shore in partnership with the Planning District Commission, then the Northern Neck, Middle Peninsula, and Crater. We focused on Hopewell and Petersburg. And here we are today to work with you all. So, all right, so what do we do? It's very hard to understand the RAF just from a presentation and where we say, oh, we implement a bunch of projects. What does that really mean? So, in fact, now that I've done that, yes, I have the skill to back up. Okay, if you look at the circle graph, that's showing you, these are the topics on the scorecard. And it's planning for resilience, infrastructure resilience, risk assessment and emergency management, policy leadership and collaboration. All of that, those are categories you might expect when you're talking about resilience. The 5th category, community engagement, health, and well-being, is something that differentiates the RAFT. We talk about community physical and mental health, and we talk about things like food security during both hazard events and before. So we have divided up on that little circle graph for you what % of the implementation projects we end up working on in those various categories. And again, as Jessica pointed out, this is a community-led process. So the communities choose the projects they want to work on for a year. And this tells you kind of how those divvy up amongst the various projects. So we connect experts to address specific risks. So as you can imagine, Tangier Island had very unique interests, and one thing they were interested in was the Corps of Engineers was building a seawall. Where it ended, it was going to create erosion in a preserved area adjacent to it, so we were connecting them to experts to look at some offshore created reefs. In the town of Anancock, they're actually pretty high up compared to a lot on the Eastern Shore. They had a flooding harbor master's parking lot. And so we connected them with a Sea Grant fellow working at a design firm who came up with a bunch of flood resilience designs for them. The town of Colonial Beach had a lot of shoreline erosion, and they didn't really have a handle on what was going on. So a professor from Old Dominion University, using drones and research assistants, came up with some mapping for them and looked at shoreline alternatives. We also looked at specific risk management needs, like the emergency communications plans. Small business planning was something that the Northern Neck really wanted to talk about with their economic development staff with the PDC. So came up with a guide for that. Even down to the level of the town of Whitestone was trying to figure out how do we connect with our senior citizens. We don't have great broadband connection. They don't have a lot of computer knowledge, so we connected them with a foundation that funded emergency radios for their senior citizens. So we try to meet the communities wherever they are, large to small needs. Another concern on the Eastern Shore was there's so many Airbnbs in Cape Charles. They never knew when there was a resident at home or a renter. And the reason that mattered was with the storm information they were trying to get out. They didn't know how to contact people. Flyers would blow off the mailboxes. So we printed up some magnets for the refrigerators that would always stay there saying, this is your emergency evacuation route. know the information. You need to know it before the emergency. And we do risk mapping. Petersburg, that we just finished working with, was very interested in green infrastructure and tree canopy. So the Green Infrastructure Center, we connected them with them, and they did a lot of tree mapping. That's under the risk and emergency management category as an example. Another is planning for resilience. We've done a bit of drafting and reviewing of policies and plans for specific vulnerabilities in communities. Comprehensive plans, we held actually a webinar and recorded it for local governments on how to incorporate resilience into their comprehensive plans, looked at local codes and ordinances, emergency plans, et cetera. Water supply plan, that was something of interest in the Northern Neck. And each region that we work with, we try to bring in state agency representatives to the implementation teams according to whatever the problems or risks might be. Septic, inundation of septic systems was a big deal in the Northern Neck, so we brought in the regional health department official to meet with them about that. The Department of Conservation and Recreation's Shoreline Erosion Advisory Service, DCRCs, had gotten a large federal grant and was trying to figure out how to connect to lower income residents to distribute the funds, so they use the raft for that. So we bring in the state experts as much as we can too. And we help develop adaptation options for communities, like doing a beach relocation analysis and a downtown green infrastructure plan for a number of communities. Here's the leadership team. And if you have any questions, we'd love to answer them today, or you can reach out to us at these emails afterwards. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you all for being here today and sharing this opportunity with us. It certainly seems like you cover a wide spectrum of, or you provide a wide spectrum of opportunities for us to consider being a part of. And it strikes me as we have the conversation about future comprehensive plans, some research on behalf of the team might be helpful, with some of the issues that we've got coming forward. So thank you for that. Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of questions, and you mentioned the regional hazard mitigation plan, and it seems that this ties closely to that plan. Do you see this, does this get incorporated into the regional hazard mitigation plan? I mean, I know there's some things that are addressed that aren't currently in the plan, but
Yes.
or does it remain a separate plan?
Well, actually, it's really interesting how we intersect with that. We realized, so the first region we worked with was the Eastern Shore. And we got all these citizens to come to the community workshop, and we said, okay, what do you want to work on for the coming year? First of all, they can't believe, let's be blunt, they can't believe that multiple universities get along well for over a decade in this project. And second of all, that we don't just like study and run, that we actually stick around for a year and hold these monthly implementation team meetings. But when we said, what do you want to work on to become more resilient? They kind of look at you for a second like, where do I start, right? So we realized, okay, we need to jumpstart this process. So we now develop an opportunity list, things that they can look at and choose from. And we use as the source for that the scorecard itself, the scorecard we developed for the RAP process. Anything that was scored on a lower score range, we suggest that's something you could look at, a project there. The hazard mitigation plan, what are you already calling out in your region as a need? The comprehensive plan, same thing. What's called out in your comprehensive plan? And we're also looking at the capital improvement plan. What are the things, why reinvent the wheel if you all have already done the work, done the lift to figure out the risks and challenges in your community? Let's tap into that and put that in front of the group so that they have a starting point to look at. Now, I will say, most of the time, folks tend to pick right off of that list. There are a few times we've been surprised, like one community, it was just their heart's desire to have a community garden and food bank set up to help with their food security risks, and we assisted with that and actually got a mini grant to help with that from the DuPont Fund. But most of the time, folks kind of stick to, okay, this has already been looked at and this is what we like to do. We ask the staff, now a new thing that we're adding into the process is we're asking the staff to come up with their kind of wish list of what would they like to incorporate into the list so that we make sure that the community knows about that and is informed about that. I hope that answered your question.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Unless you need further explanation.
Sorry, I didn't realize you were behind.
So the second question I had, just so I'm clear, so those priorities are identified to work on for the next year. If it carries on beyond that year, I think someone mentioned the locality either funds it or looks for grant funding to continue that work.
We try to partner with the local government by sending them grant opportunities we know of, but we also are excited, Dr. Whitehead talked about the new faculty roster that we're developing across universities. We're hoping that that will provide some resources for local governments to use to continue that work after the year of implementation. So it's about an 18-month process, by the way, because we score, we hold the workshop, and we'll come back to visit you all again to tell you the results of the scoring. We score with the local government staff. We think that's key for two reasons. One, the obvious one, to make sure we get it right, and two, to make sure that they're fully aware of what's going on before we present to their bosses what the results are. And then we hold the 1 year of implementation meetings after that.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, how's it going? I thank you for being here, everyone. And I, as you were talking, I kind of kept returning to this concept of the scorecard. And I'm trying to really understand, you said it's very tested, it's been around a long time. Can you give a little bit of example of what one,
Yes.
what just a little taste of what the scorecard is and what kinds of things you,
Happy to, but I'm
learn
now
from
looking
it?
over my shoulder to
Yeah.
make sure I don't preempt you all. Did you want to? So this actually started, I was a co-founder with Tanya Denkla-Cobb, who's on the far left of the slide, or here. And I was at William & Mary Law School at the time with Stacy. And we had held a meeting with some local and PDC folks, and we were approached because some of the staff really wanted to talk more about resilience and how do we highlight and elevate this issue. So someone suggested, how about a report card, A to F? Because that's done by some environmental NGOs and others, and it's an effective way for them to raise money. That didn't strike us as an effective way to approach things when you're trying to work with a local government to come up and score them and to be blunt, like give them an F on something and leave. Doesn't seem like a great way to start a relationship. So we said, first of all, we're not going to do A to F, we're going to do numeric, and we're going to point out that if you get a 50, it shows you're already doing something, so it's not like if a student in a classroom got a 50, they would be very unhappy. It's not that same approach. And that we wanted to make sure we score them holistically, comprehensively, so that's why we added that 5th category into the scorecard about community health and well-being. And we sent a bunch of graduate planning students out to do research, and they did research on a bunch of report cards and scorecards, and they found that many of them end up on the shelf and nothing happens to move the needle policy-wise. So that's when we added the year of implementation support. So an example would be in the first category, we're looking at leadership. Does the leadership of the community talk about resilience? Do you meet periodically with others like the PDC to talk about resilience? Are there staff roles identified to deal with? I mean, the obvious one is emergency response, right? But to deal with various planning, all the different roles. Is it well publicized to your community so a citizen knows who to contact with questions? That's the kind of the elementary basic questions I will say about the leadership. And then there's planning. Is resilience incorporated into the comprehensive plan? Is the comprehensive plan available to the citizenry? Is it incorporated into the zoning ordinance or the subdivision ordinance? So we kind of take it layer by layer. Does that help?
That does, that helps a lot, thank you.
I'll also add, it really helps out that resilience action work group in that second step to see the scores and understand where your strengths are and where you're best targeting your effort over that next year. If you look at the scores, and again, they're just numeric scores, it's not ABC, you see that you're fairly well balanced among all of those categories, then that team may decide to choose one thing here, and move those forward. If you see that you're already really strong in some of these categories, but you're less strong in other categories, that tells you, oh, this group should maybe target our effort in choosing more of these actions in these other categories where we know that we can move the needle over a year. So it's very much more of a measuring stick, honestly, than a report card, which I think alleviates some concern anytime you hear the word scorecard. It starts to sound potentially punitive, and it's not.
Thank you, that really helps.
Only thing that I would add to that is that this has been an iterative process. So over 10 years, working with different communities, we've taken feedback in from all of the experiences, and the communities have provided things that we've added to the scorecard and adapted the scorecard and have iterative process through that. And so I think that's an important consideration, that if you all identify things that we are specific to Williamsburg, then, they can be incorporated as well.
Thank you. I don't really have any questions. The last answers and examples have really helped clarify. I thank you for all of that. I do think it's very timely, as we've identified a review of our comprehensive plan for our GIO cycle. So appreciate you coming and sharing this information and, as I say, providing additional examples of how it could work.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate your time.
Ms. Williams, any questions? Or-
Yes, well, thank you for that wonderful presentation. I did have one question also concerning the scorecard. When localities receive the scorecard back, are there some common priorities that localities in the past have chosen to move forward with?
It's a great question. Let me see if I can back up. Technology. Nope, wrong one, sorry. If you look at this circle graph right here, that tells you which topic of the scorecard the prioritized action items fell under. So as you can see, planning is always a big one. That's why we did this webinar on incorporating resilience in the comprehensive plan. There's a lot of interest in that. Second runner-up being community engagement, health, and well-being, because I think a lot of times the people that attend the workshops, that's kind of forward in their mind. They think about that. And then the risk assessment and emergency management seems to come up with a number of very specific projects, like the magnets that I mentioned, things like that, that they have something that they've wanted to work on, or the radios. Those are kind of miscellaneous projects that come up from localities. But I think planning is the winner overall.
Sounds great, thank you.
Thanks.
Well, thank you all for coming forward today and sharing all this opportunity with us, and we look forward to looking into it more as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McFarland, thanks for making the trip over. You say that now, wait till you head home. Okay, item B is presentation and discussion regarding reaffirming support and authorization agreement for VDOT's Smart Scale projects. Mr. Reed, welcome.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of City Council. We have 4 smart scale projects we've been awarded over the past few years, and because of the time that's elapsed since we were awarded the projects, we felt it was a good idea to come back to council to give council a history on the projects and go over some of their benefits. So we asked Mr. Stephen Holland of Kimley Horn to come and present to give us a background and some of the benefits.
Mr. Holland, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the tee up on that. Let's see here. So we'll go ahead and get into it. Like Jack said, I want to provide an update on prior round of smart scale projects that were approved and tee it up for a future resolution for council support there to continue these projects moving forward, allow city manager to approve any of the project agreements between the city and VDOT. So speaking of scoring cards, this one transitions nicely. Back in FY 2020, the city submitted 4 projects for smart scale funding, received great scores on those, got funding for all 4 of those. So that's what we're here to provide an update for. For those of you that were on council previously, you'll recall that resolution of support for those original applications that we're going through here. So we'll start at the small end, work our way up to the more significant projects here. UPC 115503, this is right out the back door here, Lafayette Street Signal and Pedestrian Improvements. This is 3 intersections along the Lafayette Street corridor. They're Armistead, Boundary, and Henry Street. This is signal coordination that allows you to progress through those signals without getting stopped. I know how frustrating that can be if you hit, you make it through one, you hit the other. This is intended to get that time of day progression through there, AM peak, PM peak, and then off peak as well for those. This also includes pedestrian improvements to complete much of the infrastructure that's out there for the pedestrian push buttons, the countdown signal heads, things of that nature for those projects at these 3 intersections. Prior funding that was approved for this totaled about $91,000. A little over half of that towards the engineering side. That includes a lot of the initial traffic counts, traffic modeling for the signal plans, and then the implementation side for the improvements there. Those funds are available. We anticipate preliminary engineering starting July of this year after the agreements are completed. There is no right-of-way phase for this. There's no property to be acquired, no utilities to be relocated, and so it would transition from there directly into construction starting anticipated July of next year and be complete by spring of 27 for that. Similar concept, different corridor. This is the Richmond Road corridor. We've got a few more signals along the way, but signal coordination. It does note pedestrian improvements. That's a very small element of this one that I'll touch on, but is largely the same signal coordination. We start up at the north end of Richmond Road, Governor Berkeley, work our way south from there across the Chili's Ramen Time signal, Ironbound Road, High Street Bypass Road, Mount Vernon down to the south end there at Monticello and Lafayette Street. It does also include a couple of the side streets that tie in a couple of the adjacent signals there. So this would include Ironbound Long Hill, as well as Ironbound and Treyburn, and then Monticello, College Row, Monticello, and Treyburn as well. The pedestrian element of this one is push button and pedestrian signal replacement up at Governor Berkeley, but the large focus of this one is that signal timing and coordination along that corridor, allow you to move through there and not hit every signal, every other signal along the way. Total estimate on this one that was funded, a little over $200,000. That split largely towards the engineering side of it, producing those time-of-day signal plans, implementation of those, and then the smaller construction aspect of that. Some minor adjustments that get made in the signal cabinets themselves, the pedestrian infrastructure at Governor Berkeley. Similar time frame in terms of that potentially starting July of this year. Similarly, no right-of-way phase for that, so no acquisition, no utility relocations. Construction anticipated to begin middle of next year and then be complete by the middle of the following year. Working our way up in size, this is UPC 115339. This is the Lafayette Street widening. This is looking at that segment from just north of Bacon Avenue all the way down to the Municipal Center. The section from Bacon down to Wythe, there are widening improvements that are being completed there. I'm sure you've all driven through there quite frequently. You know how narrow those lanes feel, especially adjacent to the on-street parking there. Those lanes are substandard, and so those are being widened from 9-foot to 11-foot lanes, maintaining the on-street parking within that area, undergrounding the utilities that exist largely along the west side of that corridor. That allows for that sidewalk that exists to be brought up to standard, no impediments along the way, and then an implementation and adding a shared use path along the east side of that corridor that extends from north of Bacon all the way down to the Municipal Center with that. Additionally, does include street lighting improvements with it.
Quick question on that.
Yes, sir.
South of Bacon, those power lines are already underground?
No, sir.
So those would remain up?
Those are what's going to be relocated underground as a part of this.
Okay.
So from Bacon down to Wythe.
Okay,
And then south of there, everything remains above grade.
So from Bacon towards Monticello-Richmond Road intersection, those power lines would remain up?
Correct. There's a short segment just north of there that then crosses, I think, back behind the Walgreens for that. We'll see that project area here on the next slide.
Sorry for the interruption.
No worries, no worries. Total estimate on this one at the time of that smart scale application, just under $6 million. You can see that breakdown of just over $800,000 for engineering, over $1.5 million in that right-of-way phase. This would include any acquisition, but is primarily focused on the undergrounding of those utilities and the water line replacement along that section of the corridor where the widening is occurring. That then relays into the construction budget there of about $3.5 million. Similar time frame on when funds become available, but a much longer project schedule along with this. So we would anticipate preliminary engineering starting July this year. Right-of-way phase coming online April of 2027 through December of 2027. That's that time frame of any acquisition that gets completed, as well as the relocation of franchise utilities within that time frame. Allows construction to begin on the heels of that at the end of 2027, be complete, anticipated for mid-2029. Working our way up Lafayette. This is UPC 115-505. This is the Monticello Avenue, Richmond Road, Lafayette Street roundabout. This is converting the existing signalized intersection to a multi-lane roundabout. It's tying in the adjacent sidewalks and the on-road cycle track that exists now along Monticello, tying that in, providing refuge islands, marked crosswalks for pedestrian and bikes across there. Estimate at the time of Smart Scale was just under $7 million. We see the split there of about $750,000 for engineering, roughly $2 million for right-of-way, which would include any of the acquisition, including the Kim's gas station there, and then any of the utility relocations within that phase, and then roughly $4.2 million for construction. I want to back up, though, on that Smart Scale application for, again, some of the folks that might be newer to council. I want to provide a brief history on that. For those of you who have been on council, you have seen and experienced this probably a couple times now. So we're going to jump back about 10 years here to the state's transportation, the 2040 transportation plan, identified 4 urban development areas within the city, with Midtown being one of those UDAs. The primary needs that were identified during that study are intersection and capacity improvements, both at the intersection and along the Monticello corridor there. Integration of bike and pedestrian improvements, traffic calming, and then improved transit operations. That was 2015. We jump ahead to 2016. The city completed the Economic Development Midtown Master Plan. Identified 2 roundabouts along the Lafayette and Monticello corridor there, Richmond Road there on the east end, and Mount Vernon on the west end there for that. The intent behind that being creating a slower Main Street feel, addition of the on-street parking, which we've seen now. Soon after that, as we know, Williamsburg Shopping Center got sold. We'll see the outcome of that here briefly. Jump ahead to 2017, supported the city on the Monticello Avenue study. Jumping ahead into 2018, round 3 of Smart Scale applications. We've seen 2 of the projects, actually 3 of the projects previously, this one being the 4th. We started that process in March of 2018. Doesn't get approved and blessed and funded by the CTB until that following June of 2019. And so there's a fairly long cycle in there for that application process, review, and subsequent funding with that, which the city was successful. Jump ahead, 2019 to 2021. This is where we saw a lot of improvements out there, a lot of growth with Midtown Road construction, new shops, new apartments, office space, entertainment, all that good stuff out there, as well as the city's improvements along Monticello Avenue, constructing on-street parking, that green 2-way cycle track, sidewalks and amenities from Mount Vernon all the way up to Richmond Road, and included signalized intersection modifications there at Richmond Road at the time. I'm going to pivot a little bit. We're going to see what VDOT has to say about roundabouts, and then I'm going to bring up my colleague Megan Campbell here. I brought her along. She is my roundabout expert with this to walk us through the actual site-specific roundabout, but I want to pull up a quick video here, and hopefully this works. It's about 2 minutes, so bear with me for...
The Virginia Department of Transportation, VDOT, in its commitment to improving safety and mobility for all road users in Virginia, presents Innovative Intersections and Interchanges. The roundabout is one type of innovative intersection. A roundabout is a circular, unsignalized intersection where all traffic moves in a counterclockwise direction around a central island. Traffic entering the roundabout slows down and yields to traffic already inside the roundabout. Roundabouts can be designed with one or more circulating lanes. Roundabouts are designed to accommodate all roadway users, including larger vehicles such as school buses, emergency vehicles, and trucks, as well as pedestrians and cyclists. Let's take a closer look at how a roundabout works for motorists. Before entering the roundabout, motorists look left and yield to traffic already inside the roundabout. To turn right, motorists enter the roundabout and exit onto the first leg. To continue straight, motorists exit onto the second leg, and to turn left, motorists exit onto the third leg. Pedestrians and cyclists can also navigate a roundabout. Pedestrians use marked crosswalks to safely cross the intersection. Cyclists have the choice to either navigate the intersections using crosswalks and pedestrian paths, or if they're more comfortable, cyclists can follow the same paths as vehicles. There are several benefits of a roundabout design, such as improved safety. Roundabouts reduce the number of points where vehicles cross paths and eliminate the potential for right-angle and head-on crashes. Increased efficiency. The yield-controlled design of a roundabout means fewer stops, less delay, and shorter queues for overall improved efficiency. Safer speeds. Roundabouts promote lower vehicle speeds, which gives drivers more time to react. To improve safety and efficiency on Virginia roads, VDOT works with local jurisdictions to find the right intersection type for a location and tailors the design to its specific needs. To learn more about roundabouts and other innovative intersection designs, visit VDOT's website at www.virginiadot.org/innovation.
I'll save y'all the full link there. Megan?
Welcome, Ms. Campbell.
And I'm Megan. So to kind of briefly recap what we saw in the video published on VDOT's website, some of the key benefits that are associated with roundabouts include improved safety. This is one of the key ones. This is attributed to the fact that there are fewer conflict points within a roundabout compared to a traditional intersection. When crashes do occur at roundabouts, they are most often of a less severity compared to traditional intersections. What can sometimes occur are side swipe crashes, which are much less severe than right angle or head-on crashes, which may occur at a traditional intersection. In addition, roundabouts promote safer speeds. So any conflicts that do occur within a roundabout happen at lower speeds. Again, that lesser crash severity. And just safer for all users, including pedestrians and bicyclists. Roundabouts do increase efficiency for traffic operations by having fewer stops for traffic navigating the intersection, less delay, shorter queues at the intersection. They are associated with long-term cost effectiveness. Once you have your roundabout constructed, there's a much lower maintenance cost associated with it compared to maintenance costs associated with traffic signal intersections. And a final benefit to mention would be enhanced aesthetics. There's a lot of opportunity to have some nice landscaping installed with a roundabout. Makes for a really great pedestrian improvement with sidewalk improvements and pedestrian crossings across your intersection. There's many different types of scenarios where a roundabout is a great improvement. We would especially consider those where there are heavy left turn traffic turning volumes. Intersections that have a history of crashes of left turns and through traffic. Intersections where there's limited queuing space or limited driveways nearby. And in situations where adjacent intersections don't have queuing that would spill into the roundabout. To speak more specifically to the project, UPC 115505. This graphic, for those of you who are familiar with the graphic that was submitted with the original SmartScale application, there's some key differences that we're showing here that reflect tying to the adjacent Smart Scale project on Lafayette Street and the recently constructed improvements on Monticello Avenue and the Midtown Road development. And finally, some enhanced graphics showing the lane configuration within the roundabout. So I'll speak to each of those in turn. What you'll notice with the roundabout itself on this graphic, it's what's called a hybrid roundabout, where in certain areas there are 2 circulating lanes, and in other areas within the roundabout there is 1 circulating lane. So this allows the roundabout to accommodate 2 left turn movements from Monticello Avenue northbound up Richmond Road, which is one of the heavier turning movements at this intersection. The roundabout also accommodates 2 through lanes for northbound Richmond Road all the way through the intersection. And it accommodates a southbound right turning lane on Richmond Road that is a dedicated yielding right turn lane, which is another one of the heavy traffic movements at this intersection. Additional enhancements to this graphic include it shows on Lafayette Street where the proposed improvements could tie to the shared use path that goes on the east or north side of Lafayette Street. So you'll see a wider shaded area for shared pedestrian and bicycle space there. And then along Monticello Avenue, it ties with the recent streetscape improvements in the cycle track, which you see in the bright green color. Once bicyclists come to the vicinity of the roundabout, they can either navigate the roundabout as a vehicle mounted on their bicycle, or they can dismount and navigate the roundabout as a pedestrian and use the pedestrian improvements, which include the sidewalk around all 4 quadrants of the intersection and pedestrian crossings, which are marked and would include ADA compliant curb ramps.
Now, looking at cost for this option, as I shared earlier, the 6-year improvement plan and what was approved with Smart Scale was approximately $7 million for that. This was back in the 2017, 2018 timeframe that costs were being developed. If anybody has followed inflation since then, if anybody has followed the construction market since then, things have only gotten a bit more aggressive, to say the least. So we've taken a look at what a current estimate would be using some of the more current VDOT methodology for that, and kind of bookended it from a low to high, approximately 8.8 to 10.5 million is what we approximate that current estimate to be. That would require approximately $2 to $3.5 million, which, as I understand it, Jack has started conversations with VDOT about potential funding for that shortfall there. Project schedule, similar start to the 3 previous to this, anticipating July of this year getting going on that. Going into the right-of-way phase where property can be acquired, utilities can be relocated, starting June of 2027, complete by the end of that calendar year, and construction beginning sometime September 2028. That could potentially accelerate sooner, and then be complete prior to March of 2030 for this. So with that, I will take a pause and see what questions y'all may have and pull up other graphics as we.
Mr. Holland, Ms. Campbell, thank you for bringing this forward again and for the refresher. It has been some time since I've seen it, but it has not been some time since I've heard from residents about the intersection particularly. But going to cost real quick, you had mentioned the obvious escalation in cost for the 4th project and the need for additional funds. Do you see that to be true for the other 3 projects as well?
At least on the Lafayette Street widening would be a similar shortfall. Applying the same VDOT methodology to a project that was estimated originally to be very similar to that, we would anticipate approximately $2 to $3.5 million shortfall on that one as well. For the 2 signal coordination projects, that's going to be a lot less impactful. A lot more of that time is on the engineering that goes into it and developing that signal plan versus the influence of the construction industry on that. So do not anticipate nearly that degree of overage on signal coordination projects.
And I would assume, Jack, you're looking into funds for the third project as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. You know, the first three really strike me as obvious no-brainers, if you will. You know, Lafayette Street is dangerous at best, you know, scary otherwise when you're trying to traverse that area, and particularly when you're passing a school bus or trying to turn onto Lafayette Street, which I do quite often from that vicinity. So seeing those improvements, you know, and sidewalk, underground utilities, all that makes sense. This coordination of signals along Lafayette Street. Maybe I'm the only guy who gets caught by each of the stoplights, I don't know. But it seems like it happens all the time, particularly when I'm late. So those projects all make sense. I think the roundabout makes sense. You know, one of the, and Megan, you did well to talk about it. You know, we see you say there's increased safety, and it makes sense because there's less conflict points. You know, when you look at the video and they talk about pedestrians, it didn't show pedestrians crossing over the street. And one of my concerns has always been, you know, we do see a lot of pedestrians and bicyclists through there. And you talked about bicyclists crossing, and I see in this diagram more clearly the opportunity for people to cross that area. Is that safer? I mean, because if traffic's not, and I ask that question because in my mind, if traffic's not stopping, when does the frog get a chance to cross the road?
It is safer with the speeds being lower. There's more ample time to react and yield to the pedestrians there. It's a shorter crossing rather than having to play Frogger across, you know, 4 or 5 lanes. We're only going across one lane to a pedestrian refuge in the median and then making the other portion of that. One of the things that we didn't touch on, but is a newer requirement of VDOT for the multi-lane crossing, so where a pedestrian has to go across more than one lane of traffic. One of their requirements nowadays is to install what we call an RRFB, rectangular rapid flashing beacon. That is, we're used to seeing the pedestrian signs that alert you of a crosswalk. These have flashers underneath it that pedestrian pushes the button, and those flash to better indicate to drivers that I'm, as a pedestrian, getting ready to cross here.
That would be something we would deploy
We would look
here.
to implement that on the multi-lane crossings for this. So that would be kind of the south leg of Richmond Road heading north and the west leg of Monticello approaching eastbound.
So that's good to hear because, you know, clearly we want our pedestrians to be safe. And so if I'm hearing, and I've experienced it in other places that, you know, I do feel safe when I cross. I know that a lot of people are concerned about that. As you say, traffic goes through a little slower, but does that still increase the throughput through an intersection?
Compared to the traffic signal, yes. Again, we don't throw these at every intersection. It's got to have that right balance of volumes to make it worthwhile. So if every leg was as heavy as, say, Richmond Road coming south through there or Monticello going west through there, we probably would be looking at traditional roadway widening and signal enhancements that way. But given some of those smaller volumes south of the roundabout, east of the roundabout, this is a viable candidate to efficiently move that traffic.
As I look at, just through my own experience, you know, if you're heading from Richmond Road, heading out towards south side, you know, you get stuck at that Dunkin' Donut light, which I understand is going to be part of the signal improvements, and so that's good to help make sure. I say all this. Where there's trouble is when there's always backup. You know, if you're on Richmond Road and you want to take a left on Monticello towards Midtown Row, I mean, the lights further up towards Midtown Row have all the traffic backed up, and so that really throws that intersection into a tailspin at peak hours. So what you're suggesting or being able to demonstrate is that those impediments will be less likely to occur with a roundabout and better signal coordination.
Correct. We're seeing the benefit of multiple projects here today, all kind of solving that same problem.
strikes me also that there seems to be, with the pedestrian refuge, there's more green space actually in these intersections, and certainly with the center island, you know, it seems to be more aesthetically pleasing than 6 lanes of, you know, open traffic that you're trying to cross on Monticello. So that's pleasing for me as well. So with that, I'll yield to the Vice Mayor if he has any questions or thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you for all of this information and reminding us how these projects came about. And I agree with the mayor. I think that the first 3, obviously much needed. I know just on Friday on Lafayette Street from Henry through Armistead, the traffic was backed up from the coordination of the lights. And but I did have a question. So when you say the crosswalks, that include, so now we have crossing Lafayette on one corner. Does that also include like crossing Armstead?
Correct. That would complete that quadrant.
Okay, the whole quadrant will be completed. And then on the Lafayette Street widening, how, on such a narrow street, typically how do you deal with the traffic disruption when you're trying to expand to 11 feet, but also underground, putting the wiring underground?
It's a challenge. The underground of the wiring ideally would be complete prior to any of the roadway construction, so you're not having conflicting contractors out there that would be moved in out of their way. We would likely see disruptions kind of block by block, I would anticipate, for limited on-street parking. There may be brief periods that we need to detour one direction or the other, or have it under flagger control is probably the more likely scenario. During the construction, you'll feel that pain.
Yeah, just thinking about that when I was reading through this, about how narrow it is, and then you're going to be taking away, you know, not room to really, with the on-street parking, to navigate around that. And then, getting to the roundabout, I also had, from the beginning, I've had questions about pedestrian safety, and you've explained how they deal with that challenge. And I also had concerns about that signalized intersection at Mount Vernon, because that traffic backs up already there. You know, someone's trying to make a right turn onto Richmond Road, and they can't make the turn because that traffic is backed up at Mount Vernon. So it's good to hear that that'll be taken into consideration if we move forward with this project. And then I know this can't be determined until the actual engineering takes place, but I'm also concerned how it impacts the businesses on the corner, and specifically if you cross Lafayette and you cross Richmond Road, there's an entrance to the shopping center right there that causes some problems already, because people are making quick turns into there with, as the mayor said, either someone's turning left off of Richmond Road onto Monticello. And I was just wondering is that taken into consideration as part of the roundabout, or is that big enough that it incorporates that into the overall project?
It's a great question. Absolutely a part of what will be considered in that detailed design here is the proximity of any of those driveways adjacent to the actual roundabout itself. On Monticello, just west of the roundabout there, we do maintain the existing driveway access into the Goodwill Staples there. Still allows the eastbound Monticello to turn left into it. On the other side of the intersection, the bank and the Walgreens entrance there, where that's full movement today, you can turn left in, left out, right in, right out, anywhere you want to go. That's going to be limited to right in, right out off of Lafayette. And so you'll be able to turn right into there or right out of there. If you wanted to go back in Lafayette that same direction, you would either go roundabout. They're great for setting up U-turns that way and just circulate and come out on that third leg, or going up to the light there at Mount Vernon and coming out in that direction. Movements are still accommodated, might be a little bit out of the way from how they are accommodated today, but just given the proximity to the intersection, it's that has a negative impact on safety if we were to then allow that to be full movement. we would have just pushed the problem of accidents here to probably accidents, just at that.
Okay, that's all the questions I have for now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so if I'm going down Hi, thanks a lot for this. I'm just trying to organize my questions here, so we're not here too long. If I'm going down Richmond Road during the signal coordination phase of things, is there any disruption to just the driver just taking a cruise down?
No more than it would be today.
Okay.
Generally, you'll see somebody in the cabinet when they're actually implementing the new and updated timings. That's something that we vet quite a bit back at the office so that when we get out in the field, we minimize that disruption. But then we also field test that. So after all those timing plans are implemented, we spend a lot of time driving Richmond Road, driving Lafayette to make sure at each of those different peaks during the day, off-peak times, that we're still getting the progression that maximizes that.
Okay, that's what I figured, that probably wouldn't be a project that people would really feel very much. It just happens. One day I'm like, hey, I didn't hit any red light. That's amazing.
Best case scenario.
That's the best case scenario, yeah. Okay, and then with respect to the roundabout and that light there at the Duncan light, as the mayor said, that would stay? Would that still be there?
That would still be there, yes.
Okay.
It still does control that southbound movement into Duncan, into Walgreens, and the parcels there on that side, as well as controlling the side street movement and folks leaving Duncan.
Okay.
You're still going to want to keep that in order to not impact your side street more than anything.
I'm not a professional in this regard, so but it was something that I kind of thought about in terms of like the backing up, with the flow of the roundabout. It seemed like that light always kind of is right there after you go through the intersection, and then thinking about how, there's no light at the roundabout in order to sort of time, with respect to but hey.
What we tend to see at roundabouts is, obviously you are not stopping, you are yielding. So when you are yielding or when there's traffic within the roundabout, you get what we'll call a rolling queue of, you never really stop. You're still inching forward, even if it's starting to back up a little bit towards Mount Vernon, it's still moving versus waiting on that next light cycle today to flush everybody through there. It's more continuous that way.
Okay. And then also, I just want to clarify, when we talk about the shortfalls, I understand, these projects, this obviously, we've talked about, this has been in the pipeline here for a long time, and costs change, and we talk about shortfall. I guess the clearest way I could put this is, who pays the shortfall? We're just like, what is, tell me more about the shortfall. What is that, when that cost has changed since back in 2018, when this was first put forth?
Traditionally, VDOT has had the stance of, that's on you, the locality, to then go and fund that. But again, I know Jack has
and this is what was referenced earlier with, I think in the presentation, it was referenced earlier.
This is really a universal problem currently with the smart scale process in the state, because the applications are submitted so far in advance, they're approved at that dollar value of estimate, and then you get to this stage, which isn't even construction, where it's time to start moving ahead with design, and you realize that the money is quite dated and the estimates have to be updated, and so this is something every locality is battling.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of timing, obviously we would want to know, how much and who's paying for it before, a shovel goes into the ground. So how does the timing coordination of these decisions work?
Yep, so obviously we've put in a request to VDOT. We'll see what their response is. If their response is, not what we're expecting, then that would be another decision point for City Council. And even after this process of recertifying your support for the project, we got to approve a design contract, and all of that has to happen. So there's so many opportunities to change tact if something we thought was true turns out not to be.
Okay, that's good. I just wanted to clarify that we wouldn't be like, oh, oopsie, the shovels are in the ground and then something has gone haywire, but that's good to hear, and I appreciate that clarification. Okay, I think that's all of my questions.
Thank you very much. I've got a couple questions on the congestion, but, if the roundabout had come first, then it would have made things a whole lot easier in terms of other traffic lights and crossings and things like that. You know, we talk about them being innovative, but having lived in Europe, I would say that we're really late to the party here in the States and are finally starting to catch up with what they've recognized for many, many years as being a far safer method. So back to the signal coordination thing. Is that going to be done on congestion or time? Is that how they normally do it? Because I swear when I get into, you know, if there's no one else there, it seems that the light, a lot of places is really short, but if there are a lot of cars backed up, the lights tend to last a little longer, and so, is that just my imagination, or?
That's not. Depending on where you are with that and the signal plan, the signal timing plan that may be in place at that intersection, we do look at what that kind of peak flow is in any given direction and try and minimize the overall delay for the intersection itself. And so there may be the occasion where the side street suffers a little bit longer for the one or two cars that are there to increase the throughput on the main line if you've got a heavy movement in that direction at that time. But there's always going to be a minimum amount of time allocated to any of those movements, and that would be the time for you to react to the green light, proceed through the intersection, and however many cars are accommodated in that timing plan, and then generally your yellow and red time for that. So there is a minimum for that, but it varies by location.
So that would allow for more cars to get through a light on Richmond Road as opposed to one coming in from the side streets and presumably not back it up as much.
Correct.
And for a and I assume that all of these signal timings are based on the going the proper speed.
Correct. We do get speed data with traffic count data and assess what that looks like, and that's a lot of what happens in the field when those timings are implemented. It's one thing to see it on a computer model, it's another thing to then go drive it in the field, and so we will adjust that typically if we find that platoon of cars, everybody that got released through that light cycle, maybe they're 5 miles above, something to that effect. We may adjust the timing at the next signal to make sure that they get green a little bit earlier, because the last thing we want to do is completely stop them. But then there's also some driver training that we can do in that as well of, you know, if you were going the speed limit, you're going to hit that right when we calculated you were supposed to. So there's ebb and flow there for I'm still hitting all these lights versus going the speed limit.
And help me understand, as a layperson, when I think of, you know, the light coordination, I think of it just being something you do in the computer, and it's like, whoop, there, you know, it's all done. But obviously, from the engineering time and the construction time, it's a lot more involved than that. Is there anything particular that sort of you can share that makes it a lot lengthier process?
A lot of it is time of year dependent. Are schools in or are schools out? Generally, we don't want to implement when schools are out. That's going to be the best tell for us for the time of year or school schedules that way. Beyond that, there's certain amounts of signal equipment that do have to get ordered. This isn't a heavy infrastructure project by any stretch, but there are pieces of equipment that go into that signal cabinet that, you know, I don't just go to Home Depot and pick up there. But once the contractor gets under contract, once they get their equipment in, it goes pretty quick, and then it's the implementation phase for the engineers to come in, program each of the time of day, test them for a given period of time, make any adjustments there until we kind of go hands off and say, this is as good as this corridor is gonna get, given the volume, without other improvement projects.
Thank you. And a lot of discussion has already been said about the roundabout, so I won't get into too much detail there. As to say, having lived and traveled in a lot of other places, I recognize that roundabouts are safer. One of the concerns I had was how you were going to address the pedestrian, because we had talked about that before. And so I appreciate the fact of adding the flashers. I'm going to suggest that you do those by sensors, because we have a lot of individuals who don't push the button to go across. And I guess one thing is, now we think of people walk with the light when there's a light, but if you have someone turning, then you have an extra conflict point, I guess, for the pedestrians, far more than I can imagine you would have with the roundabouts.
For both drivers and pedestrians, to your point, you're not just looking at the leg adjacent to you, you also have to see what is within the roundabout and circulating and interpret a little bit more there. The benefit really being it's a much shorter crossing. You've got refuge, one lane over, so I only have to look in this direction. I don't have to, check both ways before I cross like Mom taught me, is I'll check one lane now, cross to the median, then turn and check the other.
And from your practice, what have you seen bicyclists predominantly do? Get off and walk or go with the traffic? Is there anything more, greater percentage that you've noticed out in the field?
What I tend to see, and I'll defer to Megan here in a second as well, I see kind of the combination of it is cyclists want to leave the road. They don't want to get off their bike though. So by providing the essentially shared use path width within those areas where bikes could be circulating as pedestrians, you tend to see more folks staying on their bikes and only, stopping when they hit that next crosswalk and putting a leg down. That's at least what I've seen.
Yeah, that's what I've seen as well. I would just add, I think it depends a lot on the expertise level of the individual. Some folks who do this all the time feel very comfortable mixing with traffic and slower speeds. Comfortable navigating.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the presentation. It's great to hear about the pedestrian safety measures that will be placed, especially with the lights. I actually had a similar question in regards to bicyclists taking the intersection. Can you expand a little bit more on how the design will be conducive to both safety and also efficiency? I know you both touched on there will be the shared path with pedestrians, but can you expand more of what that will look like?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the addition of the flashing beacons in there as well. That's going to help enhance the crosswalks where bikes or pedestrians are anticipated to be crossing. In terms of the actual intersection safety, though, I didn't want to throw our industry under the bus completely, but roundabout designs come a long way in even just the past 5 years or so. VDOT's rewritten a significant portion of their design manuals to accommodate a lot of what we call the performance checks, things that we as designers have to make sure we are adhering to make sure that there is a balance of speed, that you're not able to fly into it on one end and have to slam on the brakes just to go around it. So there's a balance of speed. There's sight distance that we check across every single leg, and it's not just sight distance to the adjacent leg of the road, but also to all of the crosswalks that we would encounter with that, making sure that we've got clear line of sight. We talked a little bit about the landscaping and the median. We tend to want to stay somewhat low with that so that we're not impacting that field of vision across there. What else am I missing here?
Yeah, those are the key ones. High visibility.
That's good. Thank you. I also had another question, similar to the question that was asked earlier about just kind of how's the process of creating the algorithm with the signals? What goes into that
A lot of data collection that goes into that. We want to understand, not just at any given hour, but all hours of the day, what's traffic doing out there. Just on one day, but a series of days, back to back to back, so that we can get a good gauge of what that looks like. We then have various software where we are able to recreate the existing intersection geometry into it. There's a number of different models that we use, and then we are dumping that traffic data into it to model that flow of traffic. And on any given day, you can follow the little car on your screen and see how it progresses, or where does it get stopped in that platoon. And so there's a lot of iteration that goes into that. It's an art and a science kind of all at the same time. There is a nice easy button that you can hit where it says it will optimize it. Our experience has always been that's not optimized. It can be better than that. So we spend time refining that, making sure that any little adjustment we make isn't going to be at the detriment of intersection legs or things like that. So how you're able to progress it throughout that entire corridor is important, rather than just looking one intersection at a time.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Mr. Holland, Ms. Campbell, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for taking the opportunity to answer some of our questions. So I think what we need to do is give you a nod or no nod to reaffirm our willingness to move forward with Smart Scale for these projects.
That's right. Our plan is to put the resolution that VDOT has requested on the agenda for March at the regular meeting. So that would be the opportunity.
So I think I missed that last part. So what about March?
We'll put the resolution on the agenda for action.
Good, because I think part of what I'd like to do is, we have an open forum coming forward, so I'd like to hear from residents and by next month, hear some more information. So thank you both for coming forward.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And with that, the reminder that all of this is on the city's website.
Thank you. Okay. Item C is presentation and discussion of the 2024 Town and Gown Report. Mr. Trivett.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So this is a report that was spawned out of the GIOs that came from a recommendation of the Neighborhood Balance Committee. And it's kind of exciting that we're able to present it today, because it's one of those projects that we received assistance from the internship program that we offer through the Charles Center at William & Mary. And so an intern over the summer began the work, compiled the data, worked with Micah on the construction of the report's formatting, and then turned that over to our in-house intern, Andrew Wheeler, who went in and finished it up and collected some more data from around the state and added context, worked closely with the administration of William & Mary to produce the final report. And so I thought, in keeping with the intern concept, we'd ask Mr. Wheeler to come up and give a presentation on it.
Welcome, Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. So today I'll be presenting the Town Gown Report, which showcases one of our many interactions with the University of William & Mary. So the goal of this report is to showcase William & Mary's effects on our community, as well as how we impact the William & Mary experience. To that point, William & Mary brought in over 10,000 out-of-state visitors to their 2020 events on campus. That can stem from events from sporting events to graduations. And as Mr. Trivett stated previously, this is linked to the engaging with our partner section of the 23-24 GIO cycle. As he also mentioned, it began with the help of Eloise Hartford, the Roy Charles Center intern, and it was completed with my help, as long as the William & Mary President's Office. We worked closely with Michael Fox, who's the Senior Assistant to the President and Clerk of the Board of Visitors, as well as a fellow intern named Tyler Catani, who's the Office of the President Intern. So while this report is vast, I wanted to take a moment to highlight a few takeaways. This report dives into the many interactions between the city and the university. A few of the topics discussed include economic impact, housing, community engagement, and many, many more. In the fiscal year 2020, William & Mary students brought themselves out to the community with 73 hours of their own time to help out their friends here in the city of Williamsburg, which I think is pretty great. And in terms of where the students are, in the 2022-23 school year, 70% of undergrads resided on on-campus facilities. And on this graphic right here, this showcases the 2020 voting data comparisons, with William & Mary tying James Madison University for their eligible students registered to vote, and William & Mary taking the victory for voting rate of registered students, which I think is pretty awesome. In terms of what this report will look like in the future, it will be published on an annual basis to keep both the city and William & Mary up to date on how we are impacting one another, and this report can be found on the City of Williamsburg website. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wheeler. There is a lot of good information in here, and I would recommend to anybody watching this meeting that they, visit the city's website to take a look at the information. Excuse me. Much of what is in the report, I think a lot of us already knew. That I think we have a great relationship with William & Mary, and certainly recognize the value that the students bring to our community. Some of the housing data I think is good when you want to see how Williamsburg or William & Mary students live off campus versus some of the other institutions, and I know that's kind of a nebulous number because each community is different. But I would hope that folks would take a few minutes to just peruse the report. You had mentioned that this might be something we do every year, but maybe every other year would be fine as well. So,
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Wheeler, and for highlighting those areas of the report. And again, there's a vast amount of information in there, and as the mayor alluded to, I think information we already knew, but it's helpful seeing it documented, see the numbers. And one of the things you highlighted is, and I know this is often talked about at the Neighborhood Council of Williamsburg, is the amount of volunteer hours that are given to this community from the students. And I know that's from the people that attend Neighborhood Council of Williamsburg and others that I talk to. They're very appreciative of those volunteer hours, and many are astounded when they see that number. So again, I encourage everyone as well to take a look. It's a lengthy report, but there's a lot of great information in there. So thank you.
So thank you. Something I really appreciated about the report are some of that comparative information with other towns in the Commonwealth that have a university among them, and I think it's good to see some of our sister cities and how some of the numbers that they have and a bunch of different topic areas within the report. So I liked those comparative numbers. And one thing that I was thinking about when I was looking through the report and the topics that are covered, just as sort of thinking through how often we have this report, also sourcing what other types of information might the community, students, non-students want in a town gown report. So, because I think this is a really great, inaugural town gown report, and so, thinking about how in the future, what else might we include that we didn't include this time, whether because we ran out of room or ran out of time or don't want to put everything in there. But I would be really interested in hearing from the community over time and over years about, hey, this topic area would be a good addition to the report, so it's not necessarily the same information every time updated, and it becomes a bit more of a evolving, breathing document that we can return to over time and learn something new with each report. So I really do encourage everybody to take a look at it and think about what else you might want to hear or what to know that wasn't there, so we can continue to improve all the time. Thank you.
Good foundation that we can build upon.
Absolutely.
Thank you for highlighting a few things. I mean, when you think of 73,000 hours that students donate to the community to help across the board, it's pretty astounding. And what Stacy just said, I think building upon that foundation and also sharing, perhaps be sure we share this report with the Office of Civic Engagement, both for them to let the students know their impact and vice versa, but also to give some ideas of opportunities that are out there that they might not be aware of. I think, too, I really appreciated the fact of the intersection between quotes from the university and from the city and how they merge together, whether it be an intern in the fire department that became an employee or an intern working in social services. I also think that it would be helpful to to share with, say, student assembly, so that it gets the word out to the student population, as well as having on our website for our full-time residents. As far as having the report done annually, I think I'm in line with maybe every other year or maybe every 3 or 4 years. I think particularly when we look at construction on William & Mary campus, it's hard to gauge how things change every year when some of those projects, particularly new dormitories and renovations, are multi-year projects. But overall, really, really appreciate this. I know it's been a sort of a long time coming for those of us who were on the Neighborhood Balance Committee, and I'm glad to see it through fruition. So thank you.
Ms. Williams?
Yes, well, thank you for your time today. While I was reading through the report, I was pleased to see just the different avenues and the different subjects discussed in this report, especially when it comes to student community engagement and also the economic impacts that students have here in the city, which was very nice to see. Also, which was touched on earlier, the collaboration, I think, is a big part of the two entities, the city and the university. So thank you for your time today.
Yeah. Mr. Wheeler, thank you, and please express our gratitude to Ms. Hartford as well, if you get the chance to see her, for all the work that she put in on this.
Thank you very much. I'll shoot her an email.
Thank you. Okay, that leads us to council communications. Does any member of council have something they would like to share?
Mayor, I did want to share on January the 21st, I had the pleasure of representing the city and city council along with Councilwoman Williams, the National Day of Racial Healing event. And at that event, coming to the table, presented this Table Builders Award for Outstanding Government Agency to the city of Williamsburg for establishing the Williamsburg Descendant Scholarship Program. So it was nice for the city to be recognized for that award. So we got this nice plaque that we can display.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Here, any comments?
So the only thing is, as the liaison to the EDA, I want to be sure that those who were planning to attend the EDA roundtable luncheon tomorrow know that it has been postponed. I don't think we have a date yet for it to be rescheduled. Jury is shaking her head no, but didn't want anyone to show up and expect the luncheon and not be there.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Williams, anything? No. All right, this takes us now to open forum, which is, again, an opportunity for anybody to come forward. I do have Mr. Wilson's speaker card. Would you like to come up, please?
Good afternoon. My name's Robert Wilson, 22 The Palisades. I'll talk just a little bit about the Town and Gown report. As an alumnus of William & Mary, I, like several of you, have a real connection to the college, have a lot of loyalty and feel some fidelity to it. But as a city resident, you know, I kind of feel I have to put my city resident hat on and look at it from the perspective of a city resident. So I'll share a couple comments with you. You know, we in the city have absolutely no say over what the college decides with respect to their student enrollment, or their on-campus housing, or their parking infrastructure. Right? College has not reached out to the community when they did their new strategic plan. You know, working together in the past, I think we saw there was a real partnership between the city. But I think they unilaterally have decided to do a couple things, right? And one of the things they did was embark upon a long-term dormitory renovation program, probably largely overdue. However, they closed Yates, Monroe, and now Old Dominion, Brown, and so they're down 1,000 beds or 1,000 beds for students. At the same time, they decided to increase their enrollment size, right? So while they reduced 1,000 beds, over the last 3 years, they've increased their undergraduate enrollment by over 750 students. So that's the equivalent of 600 apartment units, assuming 3 students per apartment. So now we've been thrust with 600 residential units, occupied students, in a city that only has something over 4,000 residential units, right? So that's a tremendous burden, and something that the university unilaterally did without reaching up and seeing what the impact is. There's also been no new net on-campus housing for the 750 students, on-campus parking for the 700. And you that do business on the campus know what it's like to try to get a parking space during the day. And certainly trying to get one at basketball games is almost impossible these days. College policies designed for the benefit of the college further create problems for city residents. The college charges over $500 for a student to park on campus, which forces many of the students to try to find parking off campus. Further, the college policy is to close on-campus parties at 11 o'clock. It drives students to hold their parties off campus in our communities. And we have groups of students like frats and sororities that rent houses off campus to hold their parties. Closing at 11 o'clock for a college student seems a little unreasonable. I remember when my children were college students, they generally didn't even go out to parties till 10 o'clock. In the report that was presented, pages 21 and 22 of the presentation is contradicted by William Mary's own capital plan, which states that once the Westwoods complex and Jamestown Road dormitories are completed and placed into service, other dorms will be taken out of service for renovation or replacement. The capital plan timeline reflects no increase in dorm rooms until the next decade. So off-campus housing situation is not likely to improve. In 2024, the city paid over $60 million for city government services, of which about 37% was financed by property taxes. William Mary owns over $800 million in real estate taxes not subject to the city real estate tax, thus avoiding over $5 million a year in taxes. And few students actually own real estate in the city and thus pay no real estate taxes. City services are largely financed by a little more than 4,000 property owners in the city and a non-student population of about 6,800 adults. The 10,000 visitors referenced in the report brought in about $500,000 in lodging, meals, and sales taxes of the $49 million in taxes collected in 2024. The presentation made mention of William Mary's housing compared to other Virginia universities. It should be noted that when the Blacksburg City Council pushed back on Virginia Tech's plan to increase their enrollment, complaining about on-campus housing infrastructure, the president of Virginia Tech announced that they would pause enrollment increases while they addressed their campus housing problem. UVA, after years of taking a hands-off approach to off-campus housing, was ultimately forced to get involved due to the problems generated for Charlottesville. Listen, I think we understand the value of William Mary, but the off-campus housing and parking infrastructure problems are a real issue for residents, and no amount of cheerleading by the city will improve it. We should not be changing the character of the city to address the college's housing and parking infrastructure problems. Most cities would like to see the city and city council engage with the college on these issues rather than trying to justify growth and development to solve their problems.
Mr. Wilson,
Thank you for your attention.
Is there anybody else who'd like to come forward? Seeing no one else, I'll close the closed session, or the open forum, and I believe we have an item for closed session.
We do. I move to go into closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of discussing one personnel matter per subparagraph 1 concerning appointments to boards and commissions, and discussion of the award of a public contract involving the expenditure of public funds where discussion in an open session would adversely affect the bargaining power or negotiating strategy of the public body per subparagraph 29 regarding schools.
Second.
Okay?
Ms. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Yeah, we will go into closed session, and for my housing authority folks, we're going to try to hurry up so we can get back to you guys. Thank you. Return. open session.
I move to approve the certification of a closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia.
Second?
Okay,
Ms. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
for a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
We are adjourned.